The pen trembled in her hand. Kayla Monroe stared at the divorce papers spread across the kitchen table, rain hammering against the windows like the universe was mourning with her. 8 months pregnant, swollen feet throbbing, exhausted from a 10-hour shift at the investment firm where she'd been carrying not just a baby, but the weight of a marriage that was already dead. She just hadn't known it yet. Ryan sat across from her, jaw set, eyes cold in a way she'd never seen before. This was the man who'd whispered promises under string lights at their wedding. The man she'd refinanced their house for, drained her retirement for, believed in through 5 failed startups and countless just one more time conversations. Now he was looking at her like she was an obstacle he was finally removing. "Sign it, Kayla." His voice was flat, clinical. "We both know this is over." Her hand moved to her belly instinctively, protectively. "The baby, I'll pay child support, whatever the court says, but I'm not staying." "Why?" The word cracked. "What did I do wrong?" He didn't answer immediately, just slid his phone across the table, screen lit with a photo that made Kayla's world tilt. Ryan and Madison, laughing on a beach somewhere warm and expensive. Madison's hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. The caption read, "Finally found my person," posted 3 days ago. While Kayla had been at a doctor's appointment alone because Ryan claimed he had an important investor meeting. "She's 26, Ryan said, like he was explaining a business decision. "No baggage, no history. She makes me feel alive again." He paused. "You make me feel tired." The words landed like physical blows. Tired. After she'd worked 70-hour weeks to keep them afloat. After she'd sacrificed promotions to support his dreams. After she'd carried his child through a high-risk pregnancy while he was apparently falling in love with someone whose biggest stress was choosing Instagram filters. "So that's it?" Kayla's voice was barely audible. 8 years, our baby, you're just done?" "I'm doing you a favor," Ryan said, and he actually believed it. "You'll get the house. I won't fight you on custody arrangements, but I need to start over before it's too late." Translation: before the baby arrives and responsibility becomes unavoidable. Kayla looked at the papers, at the line where her signature would end everything she'd built, where it would make her officially alone. A single mother at 32 with a mortgage, medical debt, and a man who just told her she made him tired. She should have fought, should have demanded answers, accountability, something. But she was so exhausted, so broken, so convinced that maybe he was right, maybe she wasn't enough. So she signed. Tears fell onto the ink, smudging her name. She watched them blur the letters, Kayla Denise Monroe, and felt like she was erasing herself. Ryan took the papers, stood without looking back, and walked out into the rain. Within 2 weeks, he was living with Madison in a downtown loft. Within a month, they were engaged. Their social media was a highlight reel of the life Kayla had funded, but would never live. She gave birth alone to a daughter she named Hope, because she needed to believe something good could still exist. But here's what neither Ryan, nor Madison, nor anyone else knew. 3 months after Kayla signed those papers in tears, a man in a $1,000 suit would knock on her door with news that would rewrite her entire story. News about a father she'd never known, and a fortune worth $3.8 billion. Kayla Monroe, the woman Ryan had discarded like yesterday's trash, was about to become one of the most powerful women in America. And this story? This story is about what happens when someone who's been underestimated their entire life finally gets the resources to show the world, and one arrogant ex-husband exactly who they've always been. If you love stories about hidden power, perfect karma, and people getting exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button. These stories take days of research and careful crafting. Your support keeps them coming. Before Ryan destroyed everything, Kayla Monroe had been the kind of woman who made impossible things look easy. Born and raised on Chicago's South Side by Denise Monroe, a single mother who worked double shifts as an ER nurse, Kayla learned early that nobody was coming to save her. So she learned to save herself. Scholarship applications at 15, part-time jobs at 16, full ride to Northwestern by 18, studying finance while most of her high school friends were still figuring out what colleges to apply to. She graduated with honors and a job offer from Sterling and Associates, a mid-tier investment firm where being the only black woman in most meetings was just another Tuesday. She learned to code switch seamlessly, to make white clients comfortable while never quite forgetting the careful calculations required to exist in spaces that weren't designed for people who looked like her. By 26, she was a senior analyst. By 28, she was managing a portfolio worth $200 million. Her boss called her the quiet genius, someone who saw patterns in market data that others missed, who could predict shifts before they happened. She met Ryan at a networking event. He was 29, charming in that effortless way that came from growing up comfortable. Middle-class white family from the suburbs, decent schools, the kind of confidence that assumed the world would work out because it usually did. He pursued her with intensity, showed up at her office with coffee, texted good morning and good night, made her feel seen in ways she hadn't realized she needed. They married 3 years later in a ceremony that blended her mother's gospel church traditions with his family's country club aesthetics. His mother smiled through clenched teeth when Kayla's aunt sang. His father made jokes about diverse families that weren't quite offensive enough to call out, but weren't quite kind either. Kayla ignored the signs. She was in love, and she was a fixer. If she could turn around failing portfolios, she could build a strong marriage. When Ryan announced he was leaving his corporate job to launch a startup, some AI-driven analytics platform that would revolutionize business intelligence, Kayla didn't hesitate. She became his financial backbone, refinanced their house to free up capital, used her bonus to fund prototypes, worked extra hours to cover expenses when investors passed. She believed in him, even when the first startup failed, even when the second one burned through $80,000 in 6 months, even when he started blaming their financial stress on her risk-averse corporate mentality. They tried for a baby because Kayla thought maybe shared purpose would bring them closer. The pregnancy happened after a year of trying, and for 3 beautiful weeks, Kayla let herself believe things were turning around. Then Ryan started coming home late, missing appointments, his phone face down on counters, lipstick on a collar he claimed came from accidentally brushing against someone at a networking event. Kayla wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, because the alternative, that she'd sacrificed years of her career and her savings for a man who was planning his exit, was too painful to face. So she ignored the signs until they became impossible to ignore. Until that rainy Thursday when she came home early, exhausted and 8 months pregnant, and found Ryan sitting at their kitchen table with divorce papers already drawn up. Until he told her about Madison, young, free, unburdened by stretch marks or mortgage payments or the weight of having built someone else's dreams while her own gathered dust. Until she signed those papers with shaking hands, believing she'd failed, believing she wasn't enough, believing the lie that her worth was measured by whether someone chose to stay. She had no idea that in 3 months, everything would change. That the attorney in the black car was already on his way. That Kayla Monroe, broke, exhausted, abandoned, was actually Kayla Ellington, billionaire heiress, and that the real story was only just beginning. Ryan Carter had always been the hero of his own story, not in an obvious chest-beating way, in the subtle, insidious way of men who grow up comfortable enough to believe their struggles are universal, their feelings the most important variable in any equation. He'd married Kayla because she was brilliant, driven, impressive, the kind of woman who made him look good at company events. She had substance, credibility, the kind of intelligence that opened doors he couldn't access with charm alone. But brilliance, he discovered, came with expectations. Kayla asked questions about where money went, about why his third startup failed when the first two had similar problems, about whether he'd actually followed through on the market research she'd stayed up until 2 a.m. helping him with. She wanted partnership, communication, shared responsibility. Ryan wanted admiration without accountability. When his ventures kept failing, he started resenting her success. Every promotion she earned felt like a reminder of his shortcomings. Every financial analysis she provided, carefully, trying to be supportive, felt like judgment. He started staying out later. Networking events that lasted until 1 a.m. Investor meetings in hotel bars. He told himself he wasn't doing anything wrong, just having drinks, making connections, maintaining the social capital that Kayla's corporate mentality didn't understand. Then he met Madison at a tech mixer. 26, blonde, a social media coordinator who treated life like content to be curated. She laughed at his jokes, called him a visionary, never questioned his business plans or asked to see financial projections. She made him feel like the person he'd always believed he was, special, misunderstood, held back by circumstances. In this case, a wife who asked too many practical questions. The affair started small, coffee that turned into lunch, lunch that turned into drinks, drinks that turned into hotel rooms where he could pretend he was the man Madison saw instead of the one Kayla knew. By month 5 of Kayla's pregnancy, Ryan had made his decision. He'd wait until the baby was born. He wasn't a monster. But the moment delivery was complete, he'd end it. Clean break, new start. Madison had already found them a loft downtown, already posted subtle hints on social media about new chapters. When Kayla went into early labor at 8 months, Ryan felt relief more than fear. Early meant he could leave sooner, get to the life he actually wanted faster. He stayed through delivery, held her hand when nurses told him to, said the right supportive words. But his mind was already in the loft with Madison, imagining brunches and travel and a life without the exhausting weight of Kayla's expectations. 2 weeks after Hope was born, while Kayla was drowning in postpartum exhaustion and medical debt, Ryan moved out completely. He told himself he'd been honest, that he'd waited until the baby was safe, that he'd offered fair terms. She got the house, he'd pay child support, everyone could move on. What he didn't tell himself was that the house carried a mortgage Kayla had refinanced to fund his dreams. That child support would be calculated on his current startup income of basically nothing. That fair terms were only fair to the person who'd already emotionally checked out. Within a month, Ryan had a new job, marketing director at a hot tech startup that Madison's influencer connections had introduced him to. Suddenly, he was thriving, posting about new beginnings and choosing happiness, like personal growth wasn't just code for abandoning responsibility. Madison's engagement ring cost more than 6 months of child support. Their Miami vacation cost more than a year's worth. But Kayla had signed the papers. She'd agreed to his terms. She wasn't entitled to anything beyond what the court ordered. That's what Ryan told himself when his conscience occasionally whispered that maybe he should check on his daughter. That's what he told Madison when she asked if he felt bad. "I gave her everything she's entitled to," he'd say. "What she does with it is on her." He had no idea how spectacularly wrong he was about what Kayla was entitled to, or how soon he'd find out. Have you ever watched someone walk away from something valuable because they didn't recognize its worth until it was too late? What happened? What Ryan never understood, what he never bothered to learn, was the specific kind of strength Kayla had been building her entire life. It wasn't the obvious kind, not loud or confrontational. It was the quiet, grinding resilience of someone who'd been underestimated so many times that she'd stopped bothering to correct people's assumptions. At Sterling and Associates, Kayla had been brilliant in ways her mostly male colleagues couldn't quite articulate. While they relied on standard models and conventional wisdom, She saw deeper patterns, could predict market shifts by analyzing behavioral data that others dismissed as noise, could restructure failing portfolios into profitable ones by identifying undervalued assets hidden in plain sight. Her mentor, David Sterling himself, had once told her, "You have a gift for seeing value where others see risk. That's rare. But gifts without power are just interesting traits." Kayla had the talent. She'd never had the resources to match it. She'd spent her 20s building other people's wealth, clients, the firm, Ryan's endless startups. Spent her personal capital, financial and emotional, on investments that never paid dividends. And through it all, she'd maintained the careful composure required of black women in white corporate spaces. Never too angry, never too emotional, always measured, controlled, professional, even when circumstances screamed for rage. The pregnancy had been her breaking point, not because she couldn't handle it, Kayla could handle anything, but because it forced her to confront the reality that she'd been carrying everything alone for years, while Ryan treated their marriage like a funding source he could tap when convenient. When he left, she'd felt shame, like she'd failed, like maybe if she'd been different, less demanding, less tired, less much, he would have stayed. It took weeks of crying in the shower where baby Hope couldn't hear, weeks of her mother's fierce whispers, "He never deserved you." Weeks of friends bringing groceries and holding the baby while Kayla slept in 15-minute increments before she started feeling something other than grief. She started feeling angry, not the explosive kind, the cold, calculating kind. The kind that came from finally understanding that she'd spent years seeing value in someone who'd seen her as an ATM. She returned to work 6 weeks postpartum, negotiated remote arrangements so she could keep her job while caring for Hope, started rebuilding the career she'd put on hold, the portfolio she'd been managing before pregnancy brain and exhaustion had dulled her edge. She was surviving, barely, but surviving nonetheless. She had no plan for revenge, no energy for elaborate schemes, just the grim determination to make sure her daughter knew that walking away from responsibility had consequences. Then the attorney arrived, and Kayla learned something that reframed her entire existence. She'd never been powerless. She'd just been operating without information. The strength she'd been building her whole life, the analytical mind, the ability to see value others missed, the grinding resilience, hadn't been building toward supporting someone else's dreams. It had been preparation for the moment when she'd finally have resources that matched her capabilities. That moment was about to arrive in a black car with diplomatic plates and an envelope that would change everything. Madison had 680,000 Instagram followers and a brand built on aspirational lifestyle content. Her feed was a carefully curated fantasy, morning routines in marble bathrooms, workout sessions in designer athleisure, brunches at restaurants where a single cocktail cost $40. Every photo was perfect. Every caption was inspirational. Every sponsored post was seamlessly integrated. After Ryan moved in, her content exploded. She rebranded herself as half of a power couple, the creative soul supporting her visionary entrepreneur boyfriend. Her engagement announcement, Ryan proposing on a yacht, sunset perfectly timed, diamond catching the light, went viral. 450,000 likes in 18 hours. Major lifestyle blogs covered it. Madison's follower count jumped by 100,000 in a week. Brands started reaching out, partnership offers, sponsored content deals, an actual agent expressing interest in representation. Madison had arrived. And Ryan? Ryan was living the life he'd always believed he deserved. The tech startup was thriving. His title was impressive. His salary finally matched his self-image. He and Madison were invited to industry events, photographed at charity galas, mentioned in 30 under 35 lists. 3 months after leaving Kayla, Ryan's LinkedIn profile described him as a marketing innovator and startup advisor. His bio mentioned nothing about his failed ventures or the wife who'd funded them. Madison posted a photo of them at an exclusive rooftop party with the caption, "Surround yourself with people who elevate you. Grateful every day for choosing authenticity over obligation." The implication was clear to anyone who cared to read between the lines. Kayla had been the obligation. Madison was the authentic choice. Comments flooded in with support. "You two are goals. This is what real love looks like. Power couple energy." But some people noticed details, like the timeline. Madison's first photo with Ryan was posted 8 months ago, when Kayla was visibly pregnant in photos friends had tagged her in. Like the fact that Ryan's LinkedIn showed he was still married until 3 months ago. Like the math that suggested this authentic love story had started while his wife was carrying his child. A few comments appeared. Didn't he just get divorced? How long has this actually been going on? Any owners notice a timeline here? Madison deleted them immediately, blocked the accounts, controlled her narrative with practiced precision. But whispers started. Reddit threads appeared. Twitter users began digging. Someone found Kayla's LinkedIn, still listed as married until recently, recent additions showing she had an infant daughter. The optics weren't great. Still, Madison and Ryan pushed forward. More content, more parties, more perfectly curated proof that they'd made the right choice. Then Madison made a mistake. She posted a Mother's Day tribute to her own mother. Beautiful photos, heartfelt caption about the incredible woman who taught me what it means to choose yourself and never settle for less than you deserve. Someone commented, "Does Ryan's daughter get a Mother's Day post? Or do we pretend she doesn't exist?" The comment got 2,000 likes before Madison noticed it. By then, it had been screenshotted and shared across platforms. More voices joined. "So we're just ignoring that he abandoned his newborn? This isn't a love story, it's a midlife crisis with a social media budget." Madison made her account private. Ryan stopped posting entirely. But the damage was done. Their carefully constructed narrative had cracks, and people were looking through them. Madison convinced Ryan to make one public statement, a vague post about private family matters and respecting everyone involved. It was ratioed within hours, more comments mocking than supporting. That's when Madison started resenting the situation, started questioning whether Ryan's baggage was worth the hit to her brand, started thinking maybe the visionary entrepreneur was just a guy who'd run from responsibility, but she couldn't leave now. Not after building so much content around their relationship, not after the engagement announcement. So she stayed and posted less and pretended not to notice when brand deals started falling through. And neither she nor Ryan had any idea that the woman they'd publicly humiliated, the exhausted single mother they'd written off as yesterday's mistake, was about to become untouchable. The black Mercedes pulled up outside Kayla's modest apartment on a Wednesday afternoon. 3-month-old Hope was finally napping after a rough morning of teething pain. Kayla was at her kitchen table in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, laptop open, trying to finish a portfolio analysis for Sterling and Associates while eating cold leftover rice. This was her life now. Stolen moments of work between feedings and diaper changes. Exhaustion so complete she sometimes forgot what day it was. And a checking account that grew thinner each month despite the child support checks that arrived sporadically. When Ryan remembered. The knock was firm, professional. Kayla opened the door to find a man in his 60s, silver hair, tailored suit that probably cost more than her car, expensive leather briefcase, and the bearing of someone who spent his life in Manhattan boardrooms. "Ms. Monroe?" His voice was warm but formal. "My name is Jonathan Whitmore. I'm a senior partner at Whitmore, Sheffield and Associates. I represent the estate of Donovan Ellington." Kayla frowned. "I don't know anyone by that name. May I come in? This conversation is sensitive." Something about his manner, respectful, careful, carrying weight, made Kayla step aside. They sat in her small living room, Him perched on the second-hand couch, her in the chair she'd been sleeping in because lying down made her reflux worse. Baby hope stirred in her bassinet but didn't wake. Jonathan opened his briefcase with practiced precision and pulled out a manila folder sealed with an embossed crest. Ms. Monroe, 6 weeks ago, Donovan Ellington passed away in his Manhattan residence. He was 82 years old. I'm sorry for your loss, but I still don't understand why you're here. Jonathan pulled out a photograph, faded, dated from the late 80s based on the quality. It showed a young woman in nurse's scrubs. Beautiful, bright smile, familiar eyes. That's my mother, Kayla whispered. Yes, Denise Monroe. This photo was in Mr. Ellington's private safe, along with letters, documents, and a series of investigative reports compiled over the past 3 years. He pulled out more papers, a timeline, dates from 34 years ago, a brief relationship between Denise Monroe and Donovan Ellington, a pregnancy, an offer of money that was refused, a complete break. Your mother walked away pregnant, Jonathan said gently. She never told Mr. Ellington about you, never asked for support, raised you entirely on her own. Kayla's throat tightened. She never mentioned him, not once. She was protecting you from a man who'd chosen his marriage and reputation over her. But Mr. Ellington never forgot. He pulled out more documents, investigative reports dated from 2 years ago, showing surveillance photos of Kayla. At work, grocery shopping, walking in the park. He had you investigated? Anger flashed through her shock. He wanted to know if his daughter was safe, successful, happy. Jonathan's expression softened. What he found was a brilliant financial analyst who'd sacrificed her career to support a husband's failing ventures. A woman pregnant and alone. Someone who reminded him painfully of your mother. Strong, capable, undervalued. He pulled out a letter, handwritten, shaky script. This is from Mr. Ellington, written 18 months before his death. Kayla's hands trembled as she read. Kayla, I have no right to call you daughter. I made choices that cost me the chance to know you, but I've watched from a distance and I see your mother in you. The strength, the grace, the quiet power that the world overlooks. I was a coward when it mattered, but in death, I can give you what I failed to provide in life. Resources worthy of your capabilities. Everything I built is yours. Not because I think money erases abandonment, it doesn't, but because you deserve tools that match your talent. I'm proud of you. I wish I'd been brave enough to say it while I lived. Your father, Donovan. Kayla couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Everything? Jonathan pulled out the final document. Estate valuation, asset lists, properties spanning 4 continents, controlling interests in 17 companies, investment portfolios, art collections, private planes. $3.8 billion, he said quietly. All of it irrevocably left to you. The will was executed 2 years ago and updated quarterly to account for market changes. Paternity has been confirmed through DNA comparison with tissue samples kept on file. The probate process is complete. The assets are yours. Kayla stared at him, at the documents, at her sleeping daughter. This is real? This is real. She looked around her tiny apartment, peeling wallpaper, secondhand furniture, the bassinet she'd bought used from Facebook Marketplace. She thought about Ryan in his downtown loft, about Madison's Instagram empire, about signing divorce papers while crying because she believed she had no other choice. For the first time in 3 months, Kayla laughed. It started small, a breath, a sound somewhere between sob and humor. Then it grew until she was laughing so hard tears streamed down her face, and Jonathan Whitmore smiled like he understood exactly what this moment meant. What happens now? She asked when she could breathe again. Now, he said, you decide what kind of billionaire you want to be. Kayla didn't tell anyone immediately, not her mother, who'd have questions Kayla wasn't ready to answer about why Denise had never mentioned Donovan. Not her friends, who'd have opinions about what she should do, not Sterling and Associates, who'd suddenly see her differently if they knew. She needed time to think, to plan, to understand the full scope of what she now controlled. Jonathan Whitmore became her quiet guide. He arranged meetings with the estate's financial advisors, a team of attorneys, accountants, and investment managers who'd been managing Donovan's empire for decades. They walked her through every asset, every holding, every opportunity. She learned she owned a penthouse in Manhattan worth $47 million, properties in London, Paris, Tokyo, and Sydney, majority stakes in a shipping conglomerate, a real estate development firm, and 3 tech startups, actual successful ones. An art collection valued at $200 million, investment portfolios generating approximately $8 million monthly in passive income. She learned she could live anywhere, do anything, never work another day if she chose. But Kayla had never been the type to coast. She kept working at Sterling and Associates, kept living in the small apartment, kept showing up to pediatrician appointments with hope in a secondhand stroller. Externally, nothing changed. Internally, everything had. Because Kayla was doing what she did best, analyzing the situation, seeing the patterns others missed, building a strategy that would maximize impact. She spent evenings after Hope fell asleep studying Donovan's empire, understanding leverage points, identifying opportunities, planning moves that would ripple through industries. And she started making quiet calls. To Sterling himself, not to quit, but to discuss potential acquisition opportunities in language that signaled she was now playing a different game. He assumed she had a wealthy client. She didn't correct him. To attorneys specializing in custody law, asking theoretical questions about what happened when financial circumstances changed dramatically post-divorce. To private investigators requesting deep background checks on Ryan's new employer and Madison's brand partnerships. She wasn't being vindictive, she was being thorough. If she was going to step into power publicly, she needed to understand the full landscape. Who her ex-husband actually was behind the Instagram filter. What weaknesses existed in the life he'd built on the ruins of their marriage. 3 months after the inheritance, Kayla made her first public move. She attended Sterling and Associates' annual charity gala, the firm's biggest networking event, attended by every major financial player in Chicago. Previously, she'd skipped it, or attended briefly, too exhausted and broke to justify the ticket price and wardrobe investment. This year, she arrived in a dress that cost $15,000, hair and makeup professionally done, confident, glowing, transformed. David Sterling's eyes widened when he saw her. "Kayla, you look incredible." "Thank you," she smiled. "I've been meaning to discuss something with you, privately." They stepped into a quiet corner. She didn't waste time. "I'm interested in acquiring Sterling and Associates." He laughed, then realized she wasn't joking. "You're serious?" "Completely. I've had my team analyze the firm's financials. I'm prepared to offer $340 million, 20% above current valuation. The acquisition would be structured to keep you on as CEO with full operational control. I simply want ownership and a seat on the board." Sterling stared. "Your team? Kayla, where would you get—" "I recently came into resources, substantial ones." She handed him a card. "Jonathan Whitmore's firm. Have your attorneys contact mine. We can discuss terms." She walked away, leaving him speechless. Word spread through the gala within an hour. The quiet senior analyst nobody paid much attention to had just made a buyout offer that suggested she was operating with serious capital. By midnight, speculation was rampant. By morning, industry blogs were running stories. "Mystery investor makes play for Sterling and Associates," rumored to be internal analyst. And in his downtown loft, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague. "Dude, did you know your ex-wife is apparently loaded now?" Ryan frowned, opened the article, read Kayla's name, and felt the first tremor of something he hadn't experienced in months. fear. The official announcement came 2 weeks later. Sterling and Associates was acquired by Ellington Capital, a newly formed investment firm with $3.8 billion in managed assets. The acquisition was all cash, closed in record time, and included a complete restructuring of the board. The new majority owner and board chair, Kayla Denise Monroe Ellington. The financial press went insane. Who is Kayla Ellington, the unknown heiress who just bought a $340 million investment firm? Donovan Ellington's secret daughter emerges as major financial player. From analyst to owner, the Cinderella story of Chicago's newest billionaire. Major publications ran deep dives. Forbes updated their billionaire list. Bloomberg published a profile focusing on her analytical background and the strategic acquisition that announced her arrival as a serious player. And buried in every article, because reporters always dig, was a brief mention of her recent divorce and 3-month-old daughter. Some stories were more explicit. Billionaire heiress was abandoned while pregnant. Ex-husband now works at tech startup she could buy before lunch. That story went viral. Reddit threads exploded. Twitter was merciless. TikTok creators made videos about the universe's best revenge story. Someone found Ryan's LinkedIn, found Madison's Instagram, compared timelines and posted receipts. Within 48 hours, the narrative was complete and devastating. Ryan had left his brilliant wife while she was pregnant, immediately shacked up with an influencer, lived lavishly while paying minimal child support, and had unknowingly walked away from a woman who was about to inherit $3.8 billion. The internet had decided Ryan Carter was the biggest idiot in modern history. At Madison's carefully curated loft, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Comments flooded her Instagram, now public again because private looked like hiding. How does it feel knowing you're the rebound from a billionaire? Imagine thinking you're the upgrade when you're actually the downgrade. She literally could buy his whole life and use it as a tax write-off. Madison tried damage control, posted a vague quote about negativity and choosing peace. It was ratioed within minutes. Brands that had partnered with her started quietly backing away. Her agent stopped returning calls. Her follower count, which had peaked at 720,000, started dropping precipitously. Ryan's situation was worse. His employer, the hot tech startup he'd been so proud of, was acquired 3 days after the Sterling announcement by Ellington Capital. As part of a portfolio consolidation strategy, the new owner's representatives made it clear Ryan's position was redundant in the restructured organization. His severance package was exactly what employment law required and not a dollar more. He was unemployed within a week. The timing was impossible to ignore. Everyone in Chicago's tech scene knew exactly what had happened. Kayla Ellington had bought his company specifically to fire him. It was brutal, public, perfectly legal. Ryan tried to reach out, called Kayla's number, disconnected, emailed, bounced back. Showed up at the Sterling and Associates office. Security wouldn't let him pass the lobby. He tried going through lawyers, demanding modifications to the custody arrangement now that circumstances had materially changed. Kayla's legal team responded with a counterfiling so comprehensive it took his attorney 2 hours to read. She was seeking primary custody with Ryan relegated to supervised visitation, citing abandonment, financial deception about his actual employment status, and demonstrable instability. They attached evidence, bank records showing he'd spent extravagantly while claiming poverty for child support calculations, social media posts documenting luxury vacations, communications proving he'd lied about his income. His attorney read it and said 4 words, "You're going to lose." The court hearing was brief. The judge, a black woman in her 50s who'd clearly read the news, looked at Ryan with something approaching contempt. "Mr. Carter, you abandoned your wife hours after she gave birth. You've paid minimal support while living lavishly, and now that your ex-wife has resources, You're suddenly interested in custody? Your Honor, I love my daughter. You have an interesting way of showing it. She ruled from the bench. Primary custody to Kayla. Ryan got supervised visitation twice monthly. Child support increased to reflect his actual earning capacity, calculated based on his previous salary before he got fired. Ryan left the courthouse into a wall of camera flashes. Someone had leaked the hearing time. The photos of him leaving, defeated, humiliated, were on TMZ within an hour. And Kayla? She was in a board meeting, making decisions that would affect thousands of employees and billions of dollars. She didn't even notice the trending hashtag, Don't be Ryan. Ryan's world didn't just collapse. It was systematically dismantled, piece by piece. The job loss was just the beginning. Without steady income, he couldn't afford the downtown loft. Madison, whose brand partnerships had evaporated and whose follower count had dropped to 480,000, suggested they take a break so she could focus on rebuilding her platform without distractions. Translation: she was jumping ship. Within 2 weeks, she'd removed all photos of them together, posted a video about recognizing when you've been living someone else's story, and reclaiming your authentic voice. The comments were brutal. So authentic means dumping him when he's broke? You're only authentic when it's profitable. But Madison didn't care. She was already being photographed with a different entrepreneur. Older, more established, actually wealthy. Ryan was alone. He moved back in with his parents, the middle-class suburban home he'd been so eager to escape. His mother tried to be supportive. His father mostly stayed quiet, the disappointment heavy between them. Ryan applied for jobs. His resume was impressive on paper. His interviews went well initially, then they'd Google his name. Every search returned the same story. The man who'd left his pregnant wife, who'd been fired by his billionaire ex, who'd become internet shorthand for spectacularly bad judgment. He was unhireable. He tried freelancing. A few clients hired him until they realized who he was and decided the association wasn't worth it. He tried changing his name on LinkedIn. Someone always figured it out and exposed him in the comments. 6 months after the divorce, Ryan was working retail. 40-hour weeks at an electronics store, helping customers who sometimes recognized him and whispered to each other after he walked away. The child support payments were automatically deducted from his paychecks. They weren't substantial. He barely made enough to cover them and his basic expenses. But every dollar felt like a reminder of what he'd walked away from. He'd see photos occasionally. Kayla at industry events, hope in her arms, looking radiant and powerful. Features in business magazines, interviews about her foundation work. She'd established an initiative providing financial support and career mentorship to single mothers. The foundation was called Hope's Promise, named after their daughter. Funded by the fortune Ryan had missed by months. His parents tried to encourage him. It'll get better. This will blow over. But it didn't blow over. Because Kayla kept succeeding, kept being featured, kept being the story that people referenced when they talked about poetic justice. And Ryan kept being the punchline. His engagement to Madison, which had never been officially broken off, became a joke. She'd kept the ring, blocked his number, and moved on. When a gossip blog asked about him, she said, "I try not to focus on past mistakes." His former colleagues from the startup avoided him. His networking contacts stopped responding. The few friends who still talked to him did so with pity that was almost worse than contempt. He thought about reaching out to Kayla, apologizing, explaining that he'd made a mistake, that he'd been stupid, that if he could take it back. But what would be the point? She didn't need his apology, didn't need anything from him except the court-mandated child support that was automatically deducted. He was irrelevant to her life. And that was the worst part. Not that she'd destroyed him, though she kind of had, but that she'd moved on so completely that destroying him had been almost an afterthought, a minor reorganization, a footnote in her actual life. Ryan Carter had been erased from the narrative of Kayla Ellington's success story. He was just the mistake she'd survived on her way to becoming extraordinary. 18 months after signing divorce papers in tears, Kayla stood in the penthouse that had belonged to Donovan Ellington. It was hers now. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Art worth millions on the walls. A nursery designed by the same firm that did Celebrity Homes. Soft colors, every safety feature, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Hope was walking now, 14 months old, fearless, babbling in that pre-language way where everything was a discovery. She toddled around the penthouse like she owned it, which technically she did. The estate was hers eventually. Kayla watched her daughter explore and something in her chest cracked open. Not pain this time, but something close to peace. Her mother visited weekly now, having retired early because Kayla had insisted. Denise Monroe sat on the couch that cost more than her old annual salary and shook her head. "Your father," she'd start, then stop. They'd had long conversations about Donovan, about why Denise had walked away pregnant and never looked back, about the choice between security with strings attached and freedom with dignity. "I never regretted it," Denise said. "Not once. You were mine, fully mine, and look what you became." Kayla had cried the first time they talked about it, mourned the father she'd never known, but she'd also understood. Denise had given her something more valuable than money. She taught her that worth wasn't determined by who claimed you. It was determined by what you built with your own hands. Now Kayla was building an empire. Sterling and Associates under her ownership had grown by 40%. She'd restructured operations, promoted women and people of color who'd been overlooked, and implemented policies that made the firm a model for equity and finance. She'd acquired 2 more companies, started a venture capital fund focused on female founders, established scholarships at her alma mater. Hope's Promise Foundation was helping thousands of single mothers with legal aid, childcare support, career mentorship, and direct financial assistance. Forbes ran a cover story, "The Accidental Heiress Who's Rewriting Wealth's Rules." She was invited to speak at conferences, advise other investors, sit on boards for organizations that had never imagined they'd have access to someone with her resources. And through it all, she remained herself. Not perfect, she still sometimes cried in the shower, still sometimes felt the ghost of that rainy Thursday when Ryan had walked out. Still sometimes wondered what she could have done differently. But she was whole, powerful, exactly who she was always meant to be. The custody arrangement meant Ryan saw Hope twice monthly in supervised visits. Kayla watched him through one-way glass sometimes, not cruelly, just observing. He tried. He'd brought toys, played peekaboo. Hope was polite but distant, the way children are with friendly strangers. Kayla felt nothing watching him. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a distant recognition that this man had once been central to her life and was now a minor character in her daughter's story. She'd been asked in interviews if she felt vindicated. "Vindicated implies I needed validation from his regret," she'd said. "I don't. I'm not successful because he failed. I'm successful because I always had this capability. I just finally have resources that match it." One interviewer had asked if she'd ever forgive him. Kayla had smiled. "Forgiveness implies I'm carrying something that belongs to him. I'm not. He made his choices. I made mine. We're both living with the consequences. The difference is, I'm thriving in mine." That quote went viral. Hashtag "I am thriving in mine" trended for 3 days. And Ryan, working his retail job and living in his parents' basement, saw it and understood. He hadn't just lost Kayla. He'd lost the chance to be part of something extraordinary, and that loss was entirely his own fault. If you were Kayla, would you have handled it the same way? Strategic, public, thorough? Or would you have done something different? What does justice really look like? The invitation arrived at Ryan's parents' house on expensive cardstock with embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to the Hope's Promise Foundation annual gala. It listed Kayla as the founder and keynote speaker. The event was black tie at the Four Seasons in Chicago. Tickets started at $10,000. Ryan stared at it. At the handwritten note attached, Hope's first public appearance will be at the gala. You're welcome to attend if you can arrange supervision through the court. Kay. It was an offer and a test. She knew he couldn't afford the ticket, knew he'd have to reach out and ask for an exception. But she'd given him the option to see his daughter outside the sterile visitation room. He called his attorney, who called Kayla's office, and arrangements were made. Ryan could attend. The ticket would be comped. He'd sit at a table in the back. Supervised visitation with Hope would happen in a private room before the event. He borrowed a suit from his father, took the train into the city because his car had been repossessed. Arrived at the Four Seasons feeling like an imposter. The hotel was transformed. Photos of women the foundation had helped lined the entrance. Single mothers who'd rebuilt their lives with support. Programs providing childcare, legal aid, career training, financial assistance. All of it funded by the woman he'd left crying at a kitchen table. The private room held Hope, almost 2 years old now, with a nanny and the social worker. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly rent. She looked at him with polite curiosity. "Hi, Hope," he said softly. She waved, smiled shyly, didn't come closer. He tried engaging her with the toy he'd brought. She played for a few minutes, then got bored and wanted her nanny. 30 minutes into the hour, she fell asleep in the nanny's arms. Ryan sat there watching his daughter sleep, this beautiful child who didn't know him, who was being raised in a world of wealth and opportunity he could never provide. At the gala, he sat at the back table while 800 guests mingled, celebrities, business leaders, philanthropists. Kayla stood at the center of it all, radiant in a gold gown, Hope in her arms, confident and powerful. When she gave her keynote, the room went silent. 2 years ago, I signed divorce papers while crying, believing I'd failed. Today, I run a $4.2 billion portfolio and a foundation that's helped 8,000 families. She smiled. I didn't change. I just finally got resources that matched who I'd always been. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, and Ryan sat in the back, watching the life he could have had if he'd been a better man, understanding with perfect clarity that some mistakes don't get second chances. They just get consequences, forever. Here's what Kayla's story teaches us about power, worth, and the long game of justice. People will show you who they are. Believe them. Ryan showed Kayla exactly who he was when he walked out while she was 8 months pregnant, when he chose comfort over commitment, when he decided that someone else was more valuable than the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him. She could have spent years trying to prove her worth to someone who'd already decided she wasn't enough. Instead, she let him go. Let him build his Instagram-perfect life with Madison. Let him believe he'd gotten away with it. And then she built something so extraordinary that his absence became the biggest loss of his life. That's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is about hurting someone back. Justice is about becoming someone they could never touch again. Kayla didn't waste energy trying to destroy Ryan. She invested it in becoming powerful, successful, and whole. The destruction was just a side effect of her building something extraordinary. 2 years after those divorce papers, Ryan was working retail and living with his parents. Madison was desperately rebranding, trying to distance herself from the mistake that tanked her career. And Kayla was raising Hope in a Manhattan penthouse, running a billion-dollar empire, and helping thousands of women rebuild after betrayal. The universe doesn't always deliver instant karma. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it requires you to keep building even when you're broken. Sometimes the justice is so perfect, you almost feel sorry for the person receiving it. Almost. Because here's the truth. Kayla wasn't powerful because she inherited money. She was powerful because she'd always been capable, intelligent, and resilient. The inheritance just gave her resources that matched what she'd always had inside. And Ryan? He didn't lose a billion-dollar fortune. He lost something more valuable, the chance to be part of a remarkable woman's life. That's the loss he'll carry forever. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in strategic justice, the long game of karma, and building yourself into someone untouchable, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment about a time the universe delivered perfect justice. And hit like if you think Kayla handled this perfectly. See you in the next story. Until then, remember, your worth isn't determined by who walks away. It's determined by what you build when they do.